It's time for the Trading Stocks Made Easy podcast. Each week, Trading Stocks Made Easy demystifies stock trading and investing so you can profit big. And now, here's the host of Trading Stocks Made Easy, the wealthy investor, Tyrone Jackson.
And welcome back. It's Tyrone Jackson, the wealthy investor of thewealthyinvestor.net. I am so happy that you're here for episode 250, Visualizing Wealth. Now, this is our first episode of 2025. As some of you may know, I live in Malibu, California, and I am one of those people that is lucky enough to have made it through the fires. Yes, I was evacuated like everyone else and had to go through a waiting period to find out if I was able to return home. Now, in case you haven't heard, Malibu has essentially been cut in half. Because if you lived in the southern part of Malibu, those communities basically don't exist anymore. And adjacent to Malibu is something called Pacific Palisades, where a lot of stars like Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg live, and they lost their homes as well. So my heart goes out to anybody who was subject to the fires that we just experienced, because many people lost everything. Now, a lot of people said, well, it was primarily wealthy people in Malibu, Pacific Palisades, and even in certain parts of Santa Monica. And they would be correct. But, you know, losing everything is losing everything. Your memories, your family home, and traditions, as well as everything that went on in your community that made it home. So we send positive thoughts and prayers to those people who are going to need help and assistance for many, many, many years to come before their life begins to normalize. For those of us who made it through, gratitude, I always say, gratitude makes your blessings flow. I can't speak for everybody in the community, but I can speak for myself. One of the things that made it very anxious for me is because I am a helper by nature. I like and enjoying helping other people. So I had some work to do here in LA. I left to go back to New York. And when I returned home, when the authorities let us back in, again, we were safe. So now I'm going through a very deep assessment period as to what can I bring of value to that community. And I don't have it all written down right now. That's what happens in real life. But what I do have is a blueprint, an idea of ways in which I think I can contribute when things kind of settle down. So if you don't know anybody who was affected by the wildfires in California, you know me, and that's at least one person. So compassion and thoughtfulness is part of what's going to help get us through all of this. So I thank you for listening to the Trading Stocks Made Easy podcast. We went almost a month without an episode because the studio here in Burbank was also threatened, but not in the same way that it was threatened out there. So I love this show because it gives people hope and something to focus on, which brings us to this idea of visualizing wealth. Now, I'm going to show and share with you the tool of visualization, which a lot of people think is nothing but hocus pocus, but I can tell you from my life, it's given me almost everything that I have in the material world. Visualization is not only experiencing what you'd like to have in the future and the feelings that go along with it, it's also creating your reality, right? So I've never been one of those people in my life that just let life happen. I always had a plan, and I put myself on an imaginary track, and that gives my mind a blueprint as to what steps to take to make everything that I truly desire real. You'll find a lot of successful people also use visualization as a tool, but I want to show you in this particular episode how to use it not only as a practical tool. Obviously, there's a spiritual element to believe that the universe is on your side and that you are co-creating with the universe requires a certain mindset. So let me just recap a little bit and tell you about my journey into visualization And if you'd like to try it, it costs you absolutely nothing. And I find that it brings great peace of mind and it orients your life into a direction that you help determine. So, as I've shared many times on this show, when I was raised in New York, I was raised by a single mother. My mother, still alive to this day, believes that physicality determines financial success. In other words, when I was growing up, if you weren't physically moving or physically going to a job or doing something that was active, how in the world would you make and earn a living for yourself? In fact, if you never moved from that couch, I discovered the couch when I was 16, and I would lay down on the couch, I would look up at the ceiling, and I'd start to think about what I wanted my future to look like, because it was getting more and more apparent that I would need a job because I would need some money. And I think, well, what do I want my future life to look like? What do I want it to feel like? Where do I want to live? And what does every day look like for me? So in my teen years, and I still remember this to this day, being around 16 and visualizing on the couch the future. And somewhere my mother would come out of her bedroom and go, "You've been on that couch for 45 minutes and you haven't moved. You have got to be one of the laziest people in the entire world. Get up off that couch and do something." "But Mom, it's Saturday." "I don't care if it's Saturday, Monday, Tuesday. You're never going to make anything of yourself if you're just lying on the couch staring at the ceiling." Now, what I couldn't tell her at the time was I had been staring at the ceiling and thinking about my future life for about 45 minutes. What did that mean? That means I needed a nap because I just finished working. I was tired. So I would then go back into my room, finish up the visualization, and then I started imagining and visualizing my life. I find that it worked even better at night. Anytime after 11, because I've always been a night owl, why don't I write down, because I got into writing it down, and why don't I see everything I want to happen in the future? Now, sometimes the future was just 6 months away. What did I want to happen in the next 6 months? Or sometimes the future would be something that would happen when I was a grown-up. So when I realized that there was a connection between this kind of visualization and results, it put me on overdrive. So, as some of you know, I went to a very, very specialized high school in New York City called the High School of Performing Arts. If you ever watched the movie Fame or the television series by the same name, I actually went to that school. Apparently, I had some musical talent, I had some acting talent that was, well, a little bit more gifted than the average person. However, when I arrived at Performing Arts High School, everybody was gifted. It wasn't just me. Now, the beauty of being around people who are just as talented, or even more so, is they elevate you. They lift you up because their standards and their practices of how they maintained and grew as artists, I could essentially copy from. I could duplicate. So if someone was practicing the piano 3 hours a day and I were practicing my instrument, I knew it took 3 hours a day just to be at that level as my classmate, right? So we had the opportunity at this wonderful, wonderful place to develop discipline. Now, that was a wonderful 4 years, but now what do I do when I'm not being trained as an artist every single day? How do I figure out my life? And that required that I stop, think, and visualize. So I knew I'd be somehow connected to the entertainment business. So I realized I wanted an education. But the problem was when I had the education, it was very expensive. So my mother was like, "Don't ask me anything about college. I don't have any money. You'll have to figure that out." So I had to figure out how to go to college, how to study psychology, because I was always interested in people, and how to pay for it at the same time. And then at that time, since I was on television doing commercials, how do I keep that life going? Well, that was easy because I knew I didn't want to leave New York City because that was how I was starting to make money. So I said, well, I'm willing to be a college student, but I want it to be affordable, which meant a city university, which is where I went. And At the end of the 4-year period, I want to make sure that I have a nice, clean place to live that was nice, upscale, and I loved. Well, I kept thinking about that over and over and over again. And as it turns out, my mother says there's an application for this place in New York City called Manhattan Plaza. If you know anything about New York City, it's federally subsidized housing for artists, and it's on the west side in the 40s. So that meant that in order to qualify to live there, you had to have 50% of your income as a performing artist, and other 50% of your income could be from survival jobs. But since I was already on television, 100% of my income came from the performing arts. I instantly qualified. Don't you know, a year after leaving college, I got an apartment at this place called Manhattan Plaza. Now, this is where exceptional people went in the real world if you qualified to live there. A lot of celebrity names you would recognize also live there. But one of my neighbors upstairs was a 16-year-old girl who was a piano player who went on to be very famous because her mother was an actress and lived in this community, and her name is Alicia Keys. Downstairs on the 5th floor, below me, because I lived on the 6th floor, was a comedian who I knew from the community who wound up creating 2 television shows, one called Seinfeld, and that comedian's name was Larry David. Yes, I used to see Larry David in the laundry room doing his laundry, and a slew of other famous people who lived around me, who were working their way up in the creative world, and we all lived in this wonderful community together. So I am very accustomed to living around people who are very successful, hardworking, and driven. What I didn't know was that I'd wind up being the wealthy investor because I was very interested in money and wealth. And I remember to this day one specific visualization I started doing when I lived at home with my mother, which was around money. And I decided in my head that I was going to earn my first $1 million at age 21. And I can remember the night when I said, yes, I want $1 million by the age of 21. And then, for reasons I can't explain to you, I canceled that visualization and said, you should probably struggle for a few more years. This is what was going through my head. So why don't you push back your first $1 million to about 25? Because you want to know what it's like to actually live in the real world without all this money. You see, even back then, for reasons I can't totally explain to you, I was choosing my future. Okay? So I pushed my $1 million dream back 4 years because I wanted to keep it real and know what it was like to live in the real world. And then I'll elevate myself at age 25. And what do you think actually happened? Well, I was not a millionaire at 21. You may say, well, Tyrone, what's the big deal? But I wasn't a millionaire at 25 either. I still wanted to learn some of those money lessons. But as I got older and I started to learn how money flowed through the system, I said, you better get a little bit more serious about this millionaire thing, because if you stay on this other track, this isn't totally fun. Not always having your rent, not knowing how you're going to get health insurance, not being able to travel. And I would say in my late 20s, I really changed my mindset. And I really started to develop what's known as a millionaire mindset. I use that term today because I really started to decode money, and I realized I wanted massive amounts of it to flow to me, not because it made me a better person. It just allowed me to master the art of manifestation and money. And I was always around people who did very, very well and who would hit these highs when it came to money because they sold a movie or a book, or they were on a hit television show, or as I said, they created a hit television show and they ascended in their life. So are you the type of person who's ready to ascend, who's ready to move forward, who's ready to stop thinking unconscious negative thoughts around money and invite millions and millions and millions of dollars into your life, even if you don't have millions of dollars now? Well, today's episode is for you. Okay? So I'm going to share with you now a couple of things that I have learned that have been vital and permanent parts of my financial success. You ready? Number one, rich people do not have it all, right? They have all the other problems that go with life, all the other challenges that go with being a human being. They just have a lot of money. Now, when you acquire a lot of money, the idea of a lot of money is different for every person. So to me, a lot of money might be $80 million. To you, a lot of money might be $800,000. The beauty is you get to choose what a lot of money means to you. Now, here's what I can tell you from experience. Whenever you hit that dollar amount that you consider to be a lot, absolutely nothing is going to change. If you like Chinese food, you just order more Chinese food. If you like fast cars, you just get more fast cars. If you like brand name sneakers, you just get brand name sneakers. But you are essentially the same person, regardless of how much money you have. You have more experiences. You meet more people who are like you, but in essence, you are the same. Now, if you're uncomfortable with a lot of money, what a lot of people do is they blow their money so they can go back to where they came from because that's comfortable and that's known. Becoming a millionaire or multimillionaire is going to require that you do a lot of things that make you uncomfortable because that's how you grow. Okay? So when I decided I wanted to have a lot of money or a lot more money than I had growing up, which was not difficult, I had to pick a dollar amount. Now, for me, it was the $1 million. I just thought $1 million was like, wow, if you got there, life would be incredible. Now, it's very nice, but it's not incredible. Okay? And then you don't get to keep that $1 million, as I've said many times on the show, because you owe taxes on that. So on $1 million, if you gross that, you're really walking out with about $500,000. Not too shabby at all. But when you become a parent, that $500,000 has to be used towards your family, your kids, your life, cousins, relatives who need help, and the practicalities of life. And maybe you might want your kids to go to college, so you start preparing for that. So, what was the biggest change to get to the $1 million? It was seeing the $1 million as real. I realized that the task of getting $1 million or earning $1 million really wasn't that much of a big deal at all. There are people all over the world who had already achieved that. So I really didn't have to create anything. I just had to find out how they got there. And since when I started my millionaire journey, I think I had about $1,000, I had a little work to do to learn what those people did. So I ran into someone from my old neighborhood, my Manhattan Plaza days, and they said, "Oh man, I haven't seen you in a long time. You look great. I see you on social media. You're the wealthy investor now." They said, "The funny thing about you is you always had money magazines." I said, "Get out of here." They go, "Yeah, I'd go in the compactor room where we would empty our garbage and leave the magazines on the floor. And you always were throwing away money magazines." I said, "Really?" "Yeah." I thought that was so funny because I never told you that. I would then pick up those magazines and I'd read them myself. So I was always waiting for you to drop off your copies. And I figured when Tyrone's done, I'll take them to my apartment and I'll read those magazines. So the reason I started to read those magazines, because one of the things I discovered is wealth is nothing more than a series of positive habits. People who are self-made, they make money a priority and they put money away saving. And then they put a little bit more money, even if it's $100 a month, away in what we call investing. Now, the difference between saving and investing is that saving, there's no risk. You put your money in the bank and the bank says, "We'll give you 2% for that money, come rain or come shine." You're going to get 2% in the form of these dividends in your bank account. Investing accelerates wealth, but you are willing to take risk. So I said, okay, if I want $1 million in financial security, some of the money that I earn has to go towards savings because I can count on that, and some of it has to be put at risk. And when I learned that buying stocks are what put money at risk, I was comfortable with that risk because life is a risk. In other words, if I take a job somewhere and I'm earning, let's say, $44,000 a year, although that job feels secure, it may not be there next year. So I was really taking a risk on a job if I decided to walk that route. It's just that it feels secure. I then learned that I am one of those people that needs to feel some measure of security, but I'm also very comfortable with risk. Now, risk, as I've said here many times, takes different forms, and you can control risk. Maybe I'm willing to buy some stocks that are really risky, but they could go up 300 or 400% within 2 years. Or what would happen if I were willing to own stocks that were considered by the market less risky, but maybe they would double in value every 2 to 5 years? What I didn't know at the time was that there are others on Wall Street who had the same risk profile as I did. They were willing to accept risk, but they were willing for that risk to be controlled, and they would invest in an index called the Dow Jones Industrial Average. 30 stocks that went up consistently in value, but they weren't the most risky stocks in the stock market. And that's why that index was created, to help investors like me and like you find instantly a pool of stocks that were less risky. Now, if you're actually trading and using the Wealthy Investor methodology, you realize that there's certain stocks in the Dow that almost always rise over a 2 to 5 year period, and there are other stocks that just don't go anywhere. For me, someone who was in a wealth accumulation mode, what I wanted to do was own stocks that had the highest probability of going higher. But it turns out the Dow Jones Industrial Average wasn't the only popular index. There was something called the S&P 500 that included the Dow. So even if I can only buy $500 worth of stock every single month, I can own the index fund that mimicked the S&P 500, and it was like buying all 500 stocks in one index, or I could buy individual shares that helped to complete the index. Either way, I wasn't throwing my money at a dartboard hoping that stocks would rise. I was playing in the pool of successful stocks and watching them rise and learning the story behind the stock, learning their revenues, and collecting quarterly dividends. And I suddenly realized this investing for the future can't be that difficult. So let me visualize how much money I would have in my Dow fund, my S&P fund, if I put in $500 a month. Now, right before I visualized, I had to decide that one of my tasks was to make wealth a priority. So I had to have a plan that indicated my thinking in making wealth a priority. So that $500 that I was putting in that index fund initially, it was a mutual fund, it was my priority. It had to be just as important as my rent, my clothes, eating, because I wanted to get out of the situation that I was born in, that I was duplicating when I first hit the world. I didn't want to duplicate those same patterns because I wanted something different. Well, when I made that $500 contribution to my mutual fund a priority, I now owned more shares of something that had a likelihood of increasing in value. Now, along the line, I realized instead of investing in the index fund, I would do better if I started buying stocks. But I don't know anything about stocks, so I started to buy books on stocks. It wasn't like today, because back then we had the World Wide Web. It wasn't really the internet yet. So you couldn't get information the way you can get it today, and there certainly wasn't a podcast. So that required reading. Well, I liked reading. I liked learning how rich people got rich, which stocks they think would go higher, why, And then after I learned about individuals who bought stocks, I then learned about institutions who bought millions and millions and millions of shares at a time. I knew if I kept wealth a priority, I'd be able to buy large amounts of shares over time because my money had a plan. So here's where visualization meets whatever you have to put in your brokerage account right now. If you have $500, $200, $700 to put in your brokerage account, you had to have a sense of what is a traditional rate of return. So if I had $10,000 and I wanted a particular rate of return, which is usually around 2% annually, I could take the 2% of $10,000 and roll that money into the fund. So standard rate at your bank account these days is about 1%. So let's do some math in reverse to see how we can get to $1 million in the future. If you have $10,000 worth of stock and you were looking for a 10% return, you need your $10,000 to become $11,000 over 52 weeks. Just let your money sit there and let it grow. However, if you added money to the growth of your portfolio, you can get higher than 10% because you've got the appreciation of your portfolio mixed in with the money that you kept contributing, right? So I started to visualize myself going from $10,000 to $100,000. How much would I have to contribute in order for that to be my reality in a 2 to 5 year period? And how much appreciation of the portfolio would I need? Fairly simple kind of equation. How much do I have? What do I need to put in on a monthly basis? So instead of having 10,000, I could have 100,000. And then when I got 100,000, it was like, how do I get to 200,000, then 500, then $1 million? Because as long as I had some income, I'd have something to contribute to the funds that were already growing. But you see, when I learned how to trade in the stock market, I realized you didn't have to rely on appreciation. You could actually take that $10,000 and start generating income through trading. My brain was like, wait a minute. What if I didn't have to sit and wait to grow my money? What if there were strategies, trading strategies, in the stock market that gave me income plus my contribution? That would radically cut down the time from the 10,000 to 100,000. And boy, when I got to 20,000, as long as I had an income generating strategy and I was making a contribution, it would take almost no time to get to the 100,000. Yes, there would be ups and downs in the market, but I could actually develop a strategy that says, when my favorite stock went down, buy more. So when it goes back to where it was even, I would benefit from that decline or that pullback, right? So I had to visualize where I wanted to be ultimately, in this case, from 10,000 to 100,000. And then how much money was I willing to commit every single month, come rain or come shine, because I wanted to eat better, live a better life. And how long would it take me to get there? And seeing where I wanted to go each and every night made it easier to make my contributions. So when I had more money coming in a month, I had a plan for where that extra money should go. Now, when you visualize and you start buying Dow stocks, most of the stocks in the Dow also pay a dividend. And I realized, because I was a psychology major in college, that if that dividend were my reward, like go out and actually buy something for myself, there would be a greater likelihood I would stay with the visualization and the system. In other words, I had to keep reinforcing myself, right? So I could see actual proof that the system was actually paying off. Now, I'm going to tell you how to get from 100,000 to $1 million right after this break. Stay with me.
Want to increase your stock market trading profits? Then you need to start your monthly membership to WITradeschool.com right now. Don't understand how to write covered calls for monthly income? No problem. Simply review Tyrone's latest stock trades in our video library as many times as you need. WITradeschool.com is all about helping you get the financial education you need to earn money in the stock market and change your financial life. Tyrone Jackson, the wealthy investor, has helped his students earn thousands of dollars per month trading stocks online from home. These are people just like you. So what are you waiting for? Follow Tyrone Jackson's red-hot stock trades and investment strategies today. Don't wait. Start your monthly membership at WITradeschool.com right now.
Okay, so I've been sharing with you my personal journey towards visualization, and now I have multiple places to live, and I live in Malibu and I live in New York, and a lot of good things are happening, and even better things are going to happen, particularly in the next 6 months. I'll share that in another episode. All right, so if I'm at $100,000, how do I get to $1 million? Well, I realized I could actually accelerate things if I had a business, something else that generated more money than I was just making doing commercials, because a lot of my money came from voiceover commercials and on camera, being on camera at the same time. So I started a teaching business. Could you imagine that? And I was teaching how to perform voiceovers in radio and TV commercials a couple of nights a week from my beautiful apartment in Midtown Manhattan. And guess what? I took that extra money because it was in larger chunks, and I would move that towards the stock market. But how would I speed up the growth in the account? Well, I had money to make larger contributions. I was seeing the proof because I was getting bigger and bigger dividend checks. But how do I get to $1 million? I need something other than shares in the company to accelerate my trading, and that's when I discovered Leap Options. Okay, so most of you know by now, as a cover call writer, you're making money every single week or every single month selling call options to other people, right? Right. But what if you could jump to the other side of the trade and start buying options? A call option, for those of you who don't know, is what's known in the stock market as a derivative. It is a separate entity whose price goes up and down based on the underlying security. In other words, if the stock moves up, the value of that call option actually goes up. So if you own one contract of a call option and your favorite stock jumps $10, you could sell that call option for an incredible profit. When I understand how call options actually function, I realized big money was made owning more than one contract. Okay? And the magic number when it comes to call options is 30. If you own 30 contracts alongside of 200 or 300 shares of a stock that is moving up anyway, when there's a small movement in the stock, there's a magnified movement in the option, and you could sell that option frequently. Now, this is the subject of the many courses that I actually teach online when I teach derivatives trading, because the amount of money that you could earn in derivatives trading is much faster than it is just trading the stocks, but you have to be willing to get good at it. So when I started trading derivatives alongside stocks, guess what happened? I lost a lot of money. See, that visualization thing, if you're buying the wrong delta and the wrong stock, you lose, you go backwards, right? But I realized that successful people never give up. They use the loss to learn how to move forward. In order to make a lot of money in options, you have to lose a lot of money really quickly to figure out how to not lose money. So to this day, I don't look at money or trades that went wrong as a bad thing. They're just an opportunity to learn. It's part of having a millionaire mindset. So when I learned how to trade call options, I learned how to trade them around an earnings period. Now, my whole game, because I could see the $1 million, changed. My whole game changed when I realized there are combination trades that work really well 90% of the time. So call options during an earnings period or right before an earnings period on the right stock works really well. But boy, was I about to get a change of life when I discovered spreads. So call options are great because they're derivatives, but spreads are even better because it's like a call option in reverse. And many of you know, because you've taken my courses where I try to simplify all of this, the amount of money that I can earn off a bear call spread is insane, because a bear call spread involves buying one out of the money call and selling another call that is out of the money against it. It's sort of like a covered call in reverse. And when you learn how to place that trade, you can get a 100% return, 200%. When I teach in Maui, I teach you how to get 1,000% return on one trade because it works. Now, most people who are on YouTube telling you how rich you can be with derivatives, some of them have done well, most of them haven't, because derivative trading is so specific. It requires hours and hours of practice to make extraordinary sums of money. So most people don't develop the expertise in trading derivatives and the systems around them. Now, I like derivatives because of these 200 to 900 to 1,000% returns, but I just like saying derivatives because it makes me sound really smart. I always say, if I have any talent at all, it's taking something that is enormously complicated and making it very, very simple. I realize that's probably a gift that I have that actually came from my father, because he can take any concept and boil it down to its most basic, and you feel very empowered that way. So when I teach people or I'm in front of very large groups, I tell them, hey, I'm going to take something that's enormously complicated and I'm going to boil it down to simple terms. Don't worry about everything else in the middle. I'll explain that to you at some point. But right now, I just want you to make a lot of money. And for most people, that's something they can lock into. Now, I love derivatives. I love the rates of return, but I also love covered calls and certain combo trades that I put together that all work in one system. So if you can make 900% on certain trades and earn 2 to 5% on others, that is going to take you from $100,000 to $1 million. But you're going to have to practice, and most people don't want to practice. When they visualize their future, they want everything to happen really quickly, exactly as they see it in their head. But you see, growth is a funny thing, because in order for you to go from 100,000 to $1 million, you're going to have to change how you see the world. You're going to have to change the people around you, because negative people will crap all over your visualization. So you're going to have to change the people that you're around, and these trades are going to take practice. Not forever. You'll understand them. So if you've ever taken an advanced options course with the Wealthy Investor and you're watching these videos, you go, well, Tyrone, this kind of makes sense. If it's so easy, why isn't everyone doing it? Well, you can ask that question pretty much about anything. If visualizing works, why isn't everybody visualizing every night what it is they say that they really want? If trading in the stock market selling covered calls produces 2 to 5% per month, why isn't everybody selling covered calls? Well, here's the dirty little secret about happiness in life. You ready? Not everybody wants financial freedom. Some people say they want it, but then they don't. That's called sabotage. They think that money is going to transform them into someone who is not them. It doesn't. Money just amplifies who you are and your priorities. I've always been blessed with a very good sense of humor. I can make very large groups of people laugh. I learn how to read a room, And I learn how to find what they think is funny, and then I can tell a story around that. That's always entertaining, and it works. It took years and years and years to learn how to put it in a professional context. So while I was working, it didn't really feel like work. But I realized if I stood in front of a group and I entertained them while teaching them how to trade, everybody had a great time. And that's what I'm able to do as the wealthy investor. So I took a strength, amplified that skill because I worked on it, and matched it with derivatives trading. Now, can you imagine how many people there are in the world who can entertain you and help you make a lot of money with derivatives all at the same time? I don't think a lot of people are really able to do that. And the number one positive comment I get when people come to Maui and encounter me in person is, "You are so funny on stage." I know, isn't that wild? But do you realize the difference between buying a Delta 60 Leaps option and a Delta 40? Remember when I told you that funny story? Yeah, do you remember that? Yes, great. Now go make 900% on your next trade. Wow. Who knew that the universe would use me as such a tool? And I'm very, very proud of it. So when you go from 100,000 to 1 million, what's the next stop? What's the next level in your account? Well, that is up to you. Because I'm going to tell you something you probably never heard in your life. There is no ceiling to the amount of money that you can earn in the stock market. There's a ceiling at your job. Sometimes there's even a ceiling at your business. But what if you and I stuck to pursuits where there was no ceiling? There is no cap. That means the only cap that exists is what lies within you and I. And that's what the Wealthy Investor Program is all about. You having breakthroughs in your consciousness, using visualization as a tool so there are no limits to what you can earn. Because if you can make 2% on $10,000, then you can earn 2% on 100,000, which means you can earn 2% on $1 million or more should you choose. The courage that's required right now to change your life is that you see things differently, and maybe in the larger scheme of things, you weren't meant to think small. Maybe in life, your job is to think bigger and bigger and bigger, not just for the dollar amount, but the more money you earn on a residual basis, the more people you'll be able to help. I think about all those people in the Los Angeles fires who have never heard of the concept of monthly residual income from the stock market. Boy, would that help you in a time of need. And I think that's why I've been so anxious to help, because I know that many of those people who have their money in mutual funds, if they just thought a little bit differently, they could have $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 a month or more in the stock market. Now, maybe that has something to do with the role that I will play in the future. Or maybe it has something to do with the fact that you've listened to this episode all the way to the end. I'd like to think of this episode as something positive in your life. It's something positive in my life. And 2025 is the year to start visualizing not where you are, but where you want to be. Let's work together to make that happen. I'm Tyrone Jackson of thewealthyinvestor.net. Head on over to my website, download the latest version of my free ebook. It's time to move forward. I'll see you right here on the next Trading Stocks Made Easy podcast.
You've been listening to the Trading Stocks Made Easy podcast. Be sure to rate and review our show on iTunes. While you're on iTunes, be sure to click the subscribe button and you'll automatically receive our next episode.